Welcome back to the channel, and in this video I'm going to be talking about a lesser known strategy called assisted sales. Now, if you're interested in property investment, my name's Jamie York. I've been in the property industry for about a decade now, and I created this YouTube channel in June of last year just to add as much value as possible for free to you guys and gals watching. So if you are interested in finding out more about property investment, then this is definitely the place for you. Make sure to smash the subscribe button, and if you could do me a favor, hit the notification bell. And if you're interested in what you're hearing and you want to help me reach more people, it'd be amazing if you leave a comment or two and smash that like button. But let's jump into this strategy. So number one, you may have seen people saying buy, refurbish, and sell. This has taken longer than I thought. Sell. Okay, also known as a flip. Okay, you flip a property, you buy, refurbish it, and you sell it. How about don't buy, refurbish, and sell? People like, huh? How can you not buy a property, not put in that purchase price, and then refurbish it and sell it on? That doesn't make sense, right? Well, that is exactly what we're going to be looking at with the assisted sale. So just to clarify exactly what this is, an assisted sale is usually with a property that somebody's struggling to sell for the amount of money that they need to. They're getting silly offers, but it just doesn't make sense as a flip. So this is an opportunity for somebody to move out of their property. Maybe it's a rental, maybe they're moving local. So they're not relying on the sale of this property in order to move on, which is a shocking amount of people, by the way, usually probates or older generation. You are, once they've moved out, going to refurbish this property to the best of its ability, and then you're going to put it on the open market and sell it on without actually owning the asset ever. And there's a lot of benefits to this, and at the end of this video, you want to stick around. I'm going to go through an exact example deal so you can understand the numbers in a real life situation. So let's jump into the first part of this and what you need to be aware of. So the first part is they have to move out. Now, this is really important. You cannot, number one, have somebody living in the property whilst you're doing the full refurbishment. It's going to be really complicated. And aligned with that, don't let the vendor come back to the property once you've refurbished it. I've heard nightmares of people coming back and going, oh, yeah, I'm going to carry on living here after you've done the refurb. Don't put yourself at any unnatural risk and exposure on that. It's just not worth it. Part two of this is make sure, if at all possible, you get a charge on the property. So the way that I tend to structure assisted sales is a bit different to other people. I think most people are doing it with a lot of risk. What I like doing is almost like a loan agreement to somebody to agree that my money's going to get paid back at a minimum plus the interest on it, okay? Now, there's different ways of monetizing. You can either take all the profit for yourself, or if it's in a great area and it's going to make loads of profit, you might do a 50-50 split on profits, or any form of split. It's down to you. But get a charge on a property. When you get a mortgage on a property and there's a lender involved, they will put a charge on your property. What that means is if you don't pay them the money, or I sell the property, they get paid back their money first. And it's the same with this. If the vendor decides to try and sell the property in the middle, I'm still going to get my money back, and I am protected to the nth degree with that. Part three of this is some form of notice. So I like using what is called a UN1. Now, you're going to come across two things in property. One is a restriction, which is an RX1, which is a restriction on property where you get notified, or a priority search, that sort of thing, notified if somebody's trying to sell it. I much prefer and think there is more power with a UN1, which is called a unilateral notice. Maybe we could put it here, unilateral notice. Okay, so make sure to talk to a solicitor about that, but I always want to make sure those three things are in place before moving forward. So what are the benefits of this? Well, there's three parts of this, right? Because ultimately, where are you going to find these opportunities, which are all over? But if we go through the benefits as numero two, well, first, we need to think about the investor, right? This is for you. What's the benefit? Well, Quite simply, more money. Think about it this way. When you're investing in property, the key figure that we're looking at is return on capital employed, ROCE. And when we're looking at the ROC of the property, that is going to be heavily dependent, yes, on the money you're making at the end, but actually, the biggest input that increases ROCE as a percentage is the money that you're putting in the deal. Now, just think about this theoretically. If you have to buy a house for 100,000, spend 20,000 on it, plus your cost of interest, plus your fees, etc. Let's say you're in for 130,000 and you sell the property for 150,000. Let's say you're all in at 130k, you've made £20,000 profit, right? That's amazing, that's brilliant. But 20,000 divided by 130,000, I can't do it in my head, I'm sorry, is a low amount of money. No, can't do it. But the percentage isn't incredible. Whereas, let's say the exact same property, instead of buying it, you don't put in that 100,000, you put 20,000 refurbishing, your fees are going to be a bit lower, but hey, let's call it 30 grand as well. But okay, but it won't be, it'll be more like 25. You still sell it for 150, but now you sell it for 150, the first 100 goes to the vendor as agreed, maybe you'll give them a drink on top for it, you got your 20 grand back, then you've got all your fees back, let's call it another 10 grand, which it won't be. So now you've made £20,000. Well, Jamie, it's the same amount of money. No, it's not, because scenario one, or the first scenario for this, is you've put in 120,000 to get, 130,000 to sell it 150 and get 20,000 profit. The ROC is relatively low. The second scenario, you have only put in 30,000 and you've sold it for 150, paid the vendor, got your 30k back, and you're still making £20,000. So Jamie, I'm making the same amount of money. Yes, you are, for far less financial input. In this scenario, the 20 grand represents a 66% return on capital employed annualized. That is a huge return, a ridiculous return on most people's bases. And what does this mean for you? Well, it means you can go further and buy more properties, or in this case, don't buy more properties and financially benefit from that. But also, if you're a bit newer to property and you want to get into flips, buy, refurbish and selling on, this is a great way to get involved with lower risk from a financial input point of view. And I know a lot of you are watching this, would love to do this, but maybe don't have that financial ability right now. This is your gateway into long-term flips. But what about the vendor? What's the benefit? Why on earth would a vendor want to do this with you? Well, bear with me. So a majority of properties on the vendor side actually come through probates. Okay, they're usually probates, higher end areas, and older generation. And I'll give an example, remember, at the end of this, to tie this all together with a deal that we did in Norwich last year, so you've got a good idea. So what's the difference? Probates and older generation, swirly carpets and avocado baths. Thank you, Nan. So great areas, great properties, high value, but the problem is there's only two types of people that typically, maybe like assisted living, but apart from that, which is niche, only two types of people that are buying bungalows: an investor to sell it on, or the older generation. Okay, obviously disabled as well. But people that are older generation and living with it are not going to be looking for a project to refurbish a majority of the time, and an investor needs to make their margin. Okay, now here's a scenario. A vendor that wants to sell at, let's say, 150,000 on a property, they need to get 150,000, but the problem is there's only 190k end valuation. That is going to be really difficult to achieve because nobody's going to be able to buy that. So it's stuck on the market, they're not getting the money that they want, and they just want to get rid of the property because they've inherited it, it's a probate, whatever the situation. Whereas you're able to come in, not only facilitate it, you're going to help their parents who, passed away unfortunately due to, hence it being a probate, adding value to that and making it somebody's home. They're going to really like being a part of that journey. On top of that, it's non-stuck now. Non-stuck? terrible use of vocabulary. It's no longer stuck. The friction has gone. It's moving forward, and they're getting a higher price than they would need to accept on the open market if they were to sell. Moving on to the estate agent, because ultimately, where are you going to find these deals? We do a lot of direct to vendor marketing. If you've watched my channel, I go through a lot of strategies for that. On that note, if you're interested in finding out more, make sure to smash the subscribe button and the notification bell. But let's jump into the agents, because the other way of finding these deals is going to be your friendly neighborhood, not sure why I went that side, estate agent. Now, we love you estate agents for bringing us deals, but why would you bring this to us in the first place? Well, a couple of reasons. An estate agent doesn't want the ugly duckling, okay? The ugly duckling property that's not selling, it's stuck, it makes their stats look bad. What they would much prefer is to have a property that is in great condition, that's going to sell quickly at a higher price, because the higher price they sell it, the more money they're going to make. So what you're able to do is say, hey, let me come in and give you a replacement property where you're going to sell it quickly and make more money. Why would they not be happy with that? The great thing for them as well, if you really want to look after them and it is a great deal, they can do a bit of double dip. That sounded a lot more crude in my... Moving on. Double dip. And what they can do is, when you take on the property, why don't you pay them £1,000? Okay, or why don't you mandate them, i.e. give them the right to sell the property, and instead of giving them their 1.5%, why don't you say, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2% instead. Whatever you want to do, but because there's more money in it, literally for everyone, more profit for you, more profit for the vendor, and more money for the agent. That's what I like to call a win-win-win situation. What's not to like? Now, my recommendation for this, before I move on to the final point, is to work with independent estate agents. You're going to find this a lot harder working with the William H. Browns of the world, you know, these massive corporate entities, or the Reeds Rains, that they've got their corporate structure. It's very much a computer says no, computer says yes situation. And actually, if you could find a small independent, maybe a family run, they've got a couple of offices, last 10, 15 years, they're going to be a lot more amenable to the market, because actually they're more dynamic, more creative, and more solution focused than most estate agents out there. So what you want to do is find a key relationship with somebody, and my recommendation is to have somebody in the office that you could build a great relationship with, and find out who the valuer is on that team, so you're one of the first people that's getting properties bought to you on an ongoing basis. But focus on the independents and you will have these deals coming through. So let's jump into a real deal, real life situation. So an example of this and seeing how it works is usually the bigger property. So this was actually brought to me by one of my trainees, and this was a property in Norwich. You looked nothing like this at all. I think my art's getting better, if anything. Garden path. It was a lovely property, but the situation of this individual was, it's a slower moving market. It wasn't a particularly nice property inside. No, that's not fair. It was a nice property. It was a bit old school. But the individual, the lady that lived there, wanted to move about 100 miles away next to her son to be closer to family, okay? The problem was, this was sticking on the market and it was going absolutely nowhere. Give or take, the figures were something like this. So it was around £210,000. It needed roughly 25k spent on it. And the end value of this property was going to be about 270,000. Well, you might go, well, that sounds like a decent property already, right? Well, no, not really, because one, it was out of area, so it was always going to add some extra complications for me with not having a build team up there. But if I go 210,000, what have you got there? Remember, cost of finance. So the cost of finance on this property over a long, let's say a 9-month period, we're going to end up paying about 18,000 in finance costs on that, which we don't because we've got our cash reserves, but that's what likely most people are going to be doing. So you're going to have 18k on that. Okay, well, that's quite a lot of money. You're going to have stamp duty. Let's call it 6 grand, but actually stamp duty will be higher. You're going to have legals on both sides, but I'll get rid of legals because we're going to pay for those anyway, right? But even with that, you've got 210,000 plus the 25, 235,000 plus the 18, that's 253,000. plus the 6 grand, 259,000. So £259,000. And remember, I'll just bring that up so you can see it, guys. 259,000, we're selling it for 270. That's only £11,000 profit for a hell of a lot of risk in that. Okay, and obviously the legal fees coming up, you'd end up south of 10 grand. Not a good investment deal for this level of investment. Let's go to scenario number 2 as an assisted sale, and you're going to see very quickly why you'd want to do this. So instead, here's what we did. We end up, let's minus 2k for legals because it was about that. It would have been about anyway. So scenario 1, we end up being £9,000. Okay, probably for about, with the lending that we would have got, maybe like £130,000 input. Not worthwhile in my opinion. Let's bring this up. Scenario 2, and this is what we're going to be really excited about. We don't purchase it at all. We're going to have 2k in legals again. We then have the £25,000 refurbishment. And with this one, just so you know, we also gave them 5 grand up front to help with payments and stuff. But we got that back at the end. Okay, so here's what happened in that scenario. So we end up selling it for around 270,000. Amazing. We end up paying the vendor the 210,000. Come back. We end up paying 210,000. Sorry. 210,000. So we still got 60 grand left, right? Now, we've then put in cash. Obviously 5 grand was up front, so we'll add that in, but that's not a cost. We got that back. We've put in 27,000. Why do I keep doing that? So we put in 27,000. Give or take on this, okay? We can even round that up if you really want to, but this was give or take the numbers. Let's just make sure we've got everything. So cost of finance aren't going to be 18 grand on this. They're probably, let's call it like 10% again, 2,700. Let's call it £3,000 cost of finance, right? So we're now taking £30,000 off, which happens to be what we invested. So we invested 30,000 into this deal and we got profit of 30,000, which means at the end of it, we've got 60k back after paying everyone off, but we put 30k in including that. That is a 100% return on capital employed. Whereas before we got £9,000 out of employing £13,000. So it's something like a 7% return on capital versus 100% return on capital. The vendor got what they want, the agent got a great property, and we needed to take far less risk. So hopefully that helps break it down. I know that was a speedy video going through a relatively complex strategy. If you want me to break this down further or do more videos around this, let me know in the comments. And if you want to help me help this channel reach more people, it really helps just leaving a comment, hitting the like button. And of course, if you want to see more property investment videos, beginner, intermediate and advanced, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.